Warning, the following video may contain spoilers. If it does, it most likely will only be for older games, and we'll do our best to let you know ahead of time, but still, be aware and have your earmuffs ready. Hello everybody, and welcome to what is technically the first episode of the BrainPulp Podcast. My name is Ed.
My name's Travis.
And for those of you who are familiar with one of the shows that we do, pretty much the primary show that we do on the channel, which is the Mana Cave, you're used to content that's based around Magic the Gathering. These podcasts are meant to be more general when it comes to gaming. So we're going to be tackling different topics each episode as it's relating to gaming, but with video games, though a lot of the time it's going to be tabletop games we're talking about. Travis?
Yes, sir.
Out of curiosity, what types of games are you playing right now? Anything in particular?
Usually, like tabletop or video games.
Whatever's striking your fancy right now.
Commander? Recently, one of my favorite games to play with people who don't like really heavy, geeky games, I like to call them, is still Camel Up.
Oh yeah,
second edition.
Yeah,
it's a very neat game where Camel's it's very simple. They go around the race, and you make little bets by picking the cards in certain order. And I've so far found that everybody can pick it up pretty easily. At first, like a lot of games, people get really with the rules, but like once you play like even one simple round, people pick up on it, as they do with most games too.
Yeah, so. It's a good bridge game. It's a classic game. For those of you who haven't heard about it, it's now in the second edition, which you mentioned.
That's one I have, yeah.
And it's a great game for when people want to move beyond. Monopoly is always, and whenever I say that, I'm not saying Monopoly is bad, because I still enjoy actually playing Monopoly. But it's a great bridge between somewhere between Monopoly and not quite Twilight Imperium, which is a crazy, crazy game. So, I mean, yeah, I think it was over at your place a couple weeks ago. We were playing that.
That was months ago, but...
It was months ago?
Yeah.
Time flies. Now, for myself, right now, I haven't been playing much in the way of tabletop games, other than we just actually recorded an episode where we play the old school zombies game, cleverly named Zombies!
OG.
Exclamation points. And that was a lot of fun. But as far as most of the gaming that I've been doing lately, it's been video games. So, because I've been sort of getting into the feel for, Halloween.
Yeah.
I've been playing a lot of State of Decay 2, which is a zombie apocalypse game. And I find it to be a lot of fun. It's if you haven't tried it, if you have Xbox Game Pass, this is another good thing as well too, because it's part of the Xbox Game Pass, though I actually bought the game prior to it being added to that, but whatever, that's for another podcast to discuss that. But it's a lot of fun. Just don't become too attached to your survivors in the game, because the mortality rate can be quite high in that game. But yeah, for the most part, that's pretty much what I've been putting most of my time into gaming, which is, it just so happens that makes a very interesting sort of segue into the topic of this particular podcast, which is going to be horror/scary games. Yeah. Now, Travis.
Yes, sir.
Are you a fan of horror in general?
I always have been.
Yeah.
I'm the youngest of three siblings, which meant my older siblings were always watching horror movies and everything when I was young. So I got exposed to stuff I should not have been exposed to. Horrible movies. In the 80s was I think, for whatever reason I want to say this, it was prime time for horror movies. So, yeah. I've always been a fan of horror movies. I always liked horror, and Stephen King, pretty much my favorite author, the king of horror novels and everything. So, yeah, always been a fan.
I was sort of a latecomer to horror, because for me, there's always that one kid that everyone seemed to know that was basically allowed to watch whatever they wanted, regardless of their age, and they were watching things when they were way too young. So I ended up actually seeing a horror movie when I was way too young to see it, and it really messed me up.
Yeah.
So but then in my late tweens, early teens, I guess, just the switch that flips in your brain, which goes, oh, this is it's fake. That finally clicked, and since then I've really, really enjoyed them.
Yeah.
Zombie movies, the Nightmare on Elm Street's, the classics, like the Halloween and Friday the 13th.
Never watched a single Halloween movie.
Not one? Not even one of the newer
No
remakes of it?
For whatever reason, zero desire to watch any of the Halloween movies. At some point, I probably should, but
yeah. I mean, I quite, some of them are obviously any of those genres that have gone on for, or those particular series that have gone on for a long time have their ups and downs.
And some of them just don't straight up age well, like the old Nightmare on Elm Streets, the old Friday the 13th do not.
Nightmare on Elm Street, I think might, you know what I mean? I really...
The first one...
Maybe, yeah. The second one, but Dream Warriors, I think, is still fun to watch.
Maybe I gotta give that one a shot.
Dream Warriors is still fun to watch. Now, we just wanted to sort of mention about horror, just so you guys know where we come from mentally when it comes to what we like and what we sort of enjoy as far as horror games or horror movies or horror as a genre. But getting the actual games aspect of that genre. Now, is there any that sort of immediately jump out in your mind that you can think of, whether it be digital or whether it be tabletop? Anything? What's the first horror game that you can think of that pops into your mind?
Resident Evil 2.
Resident Evil 2.
That's what that wasn't just a huge horror game. That is the game that got me back into gaming. Because before then, I had the Nintendo when I was younger, but I never really had Nintendo 64. Never really had those kind of consoles at that point in time. I just did the money for it, didn't have the time for it, you know. And then I got a PlayStation 1. I never had a PlayStation 2. Never, ever. Had a PlayStation 1, got Resident Evil 2 from, like, the used game store, because it wasn't exactly the popular game then.
Yeah.
And, like, I played every single... I can't say that anymore. I pretty much played most of Resident Evil games. I think that's the best way to say it. Because that game just drew me into the whole concept of the survival horror genre and everything.
It's a wildly popular franchise.
I think it kicked off, really. Well, I shouldn't say that. It really popularized, I think is a better way to say it, the survival horror genre for console gaming.
I tried to do some research into what would be considered the first horror video game would be. And the first one I could see was actually it was like a JRPG style type game, I think, which is something like similar in the vein of the old school Final Fantasy games, like that were out for Nintendo and stuff. So that I think was the game, and there's graphics showing what the name of this game is and everything, because it escapes me right now, of course, and I didn't write it down like I should have. But that I think is considered one of, if not the first sort of horror game. But
given the graphics of that kind of game at the time, probably not much you could really do in that horror genre. And
it's also not a wildly popular game as far as mainstream goes. Like it's not a game which is sort of well known. Whereas the other one, sort of the gray area, was a lot of people considered the first Resident Evil to be one of the very first horror video games.
Yeah. And
I think it's interesting that I never really got into that game because I hated it was well known for having ridiculously bad voice acting.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things where it's like, I thought it was interesting that it had voice acting because that was pretty new, but it was so incredibly bad.
The Jill Sandwich thing?
Yeah, it couldn't bring me in. But what did bring me in was the more recent turn that Resident Evil has taken with their games.
Yeah.
And it's become this sort of like first person perspective, creepy ass horror stuff. Those, like the newest Resident Evil games are I absolutely love. I think those are great. I think they're
amazing looking games.
Oh god, and they're legitimately, in my mind, scary, and not just scary. Like with horror games in video games, anyways. We'll talk about tabletop games in a bit because it's very difficult to do horror in tabletop games.
Yeah.
It's easier to do it in video games because it's closer to
a movie.
Yeah. Like there are horror novels. And I think you can tap into certain things with horror novels with board games, but you can't tap into the same things with horror movies that you can in horror tabletop games. But in video games, there is a over-reliance, I find, with a lot of the games to need jump scares in order to make it like a scary game. Don't get me wrong. Five Nights at Freddy's was a game which was...
cultural phenomenon.
Yes, exactly. And it was very interesting, the first one I found. But its over-reliance on jump scares to be within that genre just got to the point where it was like almost like a parody of itself later on.
Yeah.
Whereas there were jump scares in some of the Resident Evil games. Same thing with like very similar games to that would be, I would consider, the later Resident Evil games, I should say. And even the old school ones. When the dogs jump through
window and everything.
That was one of the earliest scary moments. Yeah, exactly.
Throw that controller in your hand.
God, yeah. I'm startled when I play games. If I'm really into it, I'm startled. And something like that will freak me out. But the sort of the Outlast style of games, like the later Resident Evil ones, they had jump scares in it. But everything else added to it as well, too. Sound, atmosphere.
Creepy footsteps. Especially when you have like the surround sound going. It's like, is that someone upstairs or no one's in the house?
Some of the most tense moments in movies and in games are when absolutely nothing happens. When you're anticipating that jump scare. Yeah. You hear something and you're like, immediately you freeze and you're on edge. But then nothing happens. And weirdly enough, not having that payoff at that time actually makes it scarier. Because it makes you more frazzled. Because the next time you hear something, you're maybe not as worried about it. And that's when they get you.
Yeah.
But I think those types of games have been able to encapsulate horror better than pretty much any other type of game. For me, anyways, based on what my taste is in horror.
Did you ever play Resident Evil 4?
Is that the Village? Or is that...
Yeah, well, you go to Village, but Resident Evil 8, I think, is Village, because that's where they put
okay, yeah.
The 8 is the whatever. Resident Evil 4, I think, was...controversial at the time because it kind of took a bit of a step more towards action, but it was still the main character goes to this Eastern European village and investigates this thing happening. That for me is ironically it weren't as many jump scares in that one or as other games, but for me you got to use for when you play it on the Wii. You got to really use the Wii remote for like aiming, and you could like I think that was one of the very first games where you could like take a dude's knee out and have him like. Or you can shoot weapons. Like, if you're throwing an axe, you can shoot the axe out of the air if you're good enough. So, like, it did take away a little bit, but it kept the ambiance of this scary town where you don't know what's going on, you know. I guess say very Lovecraftian, because Lovecraftian, of that word. But it did take a step away from horror and really open up into the action genre. But I still think it worked. It's still actually my favorite games this day, specifically on the Nintendo Wii, because you got to really use the controller and everything. But...
such an odd fit for the Wii, which is not known for its more mature titles as far as games
and
go.
This becomes a business thing, because at one point they fought to get the rights for Resident Evil from Capcom away from PlayStation, because PlayStation was where you pretty much had to go to play your Resident Evil games. And I'm sure money was spent for Wii to be like, no, we want this. And I'm sure Capcom was like, why? Like, you're the family-friendly game. You do that, and you do it great. Why do you want to take the horror genre? But then again, it was also, which one? I think they redid Resident Evil 1 on the GameCube.
Oh, okay.
And at the time, GameCube was never one of the big fighters for one of the best visuals and these graphics. They made the remake, and it was beautiful. It was the GameCube with a little tiny little disc and this little cube and everything. It wasn't one of the big boys, but because they had the fixed camera style, it wasn't, again, like a first-person shooter where you could control the camera angle. You walked into a room and you had kind of the camera angle showing you the room. It would maybe pan, but you couldn't really move the camera and select where you wanted it to do, like in most games. But it was just so well done, because they were able to do that fixed camera, each thing was like a tapestry, a masterpiece of what a haunted house would look like.
Oh, okay.
And nowadays, that's nothing. You know, they just will make the whole thing. You could investigate every aspect of that haunted house. But back then, you had the camera angle, which just set what the director wanted you to see, and mwah.
Yeah, that was one of the big things that I've always heard about with those games that people either loved or hated, was the sort of the fact that the camera angle was dictated to you type of thing. But it is, not the greatest, like you had said, it's a great way of almost like forcing your players to see it from the creepiest perspective type of thing. Yeah,
calculated, the creepiest possible angle.
Yeah.
And delivered.
Whereas for me, most of the horror games that I would play, like video games and stuff, would be first person stuff. Now, System Shock, which some people may not consider it a horror game, I 100% do, because it's basically like you're at the space station, which has been taken over. It's the not really the prequel to the spiritual successor to it would be BioShock, and those games could be creepy, but they weren't what I would consider necessarily horror games. Whereas System Shock, I still consider a horror game. That game freaked me out so much. The sound in that game was incredible. I mean, obviously the graphics are dated, though they are remaking it, and I'm super excited for that because I backed that Kickstarter.
Hasn't that been in a while, I think, now?
Yeah, but I keep getting development. It's coming soon. It's coming very, very soon. And I've been able to see some of the demos and stuff like that, and it's looking really great. But just the character models back then were so creepy. And the things you would run into and the audio and stuff. And you would discover these little audio recordings left by other people. So you'd hear about stories that were going on and things like that sucked me into it even more.
I brought down the last of the sim units today.
I am full of the glory of the many.
Here comes Bronson. I am at peace. Good evening, Bronson. Have you come to...
They do that a lot in games now, and it's a great way to flesh out the world. And,
yes.
And, make it really creepy sometimes.
And I think that's great because it gets you invested in it mentally. And I think if you start to get like that, that's when certain things, that's when I can forgive certain jump scares, because if it's part of the game and it's very story driven and stuff like that, and you're invested in it, I don't mind being scared like that. I don't like when it's being used as a crutch.
Yeah.
But when you build up this sort of atmosphere, and a lot of times with those audio logs, it's pretty impressive as to how deeply involved in the game I can get. And I've done the control throwing thing before in the past when I've been freaked out in a game. Now, with tabletop games, there's no real there are horror tabletop games for sure, 100%. We played one. Zombies would be considered horror. Zombicide, which I'm actually wearing a shirt for specifically for the theme of this.
Mysterium, Arkham Horror. It's got
Arkham
the word
Horror,
in the title.
Yeah.
Trail at the House on the Hill. There's a lot of them.
Some
actually.
of the subscribers as well too to the channel who left comments previously about. Well, I asked for basically their suggestions as well too. Call of Cthulhu was one of the ones which was brought up by a couple people in the comment section. I started to look into a few of the games that they suggested that I didn't know about. The Death May Die, which I sort of looked into, and it looks like it could be a really fun game. And Horrified, which is a game that I actually wanted to buy ages ago. We're surrounded by board games which I haven't even had a chance to play yet. So I have to sort of limit right now as to what I get. But Horrified I love because it uses the old classic, like black and white horror characters. Dracula, Bride of Frankenstein, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, Werewolf. But it's the old classic style like you'd see it in the movies. So all of these, there are a ton of board games that would be considered within the horror genre. But none of them can really give you that sort of feeling that playing an actual horror game is like an actual sort of like suspense and terror. I think the closest board games can come is if you feel invested in whatever character you're playing, and there can be like anxiety built up. Throughout the game. If there's anything that has like a ticking clock or some sort of thing where you have a limited number of time to do things, builds up anxiety. The
VCR board games of the past.
Yes.
Were great at that because I think they're meant to be played within an hour kind of thing. You had an hour to play it. Yeah. And because, moving, people play as turns and everything, there's almost a hurry up, get your turn so I can get my turn because they would have these essentially jump scares. Where the TV would have some guy, stop, whose turn is it next? Yeah. And it would people who aren't really gamers, people who aren't really in that much into horror would get into it. Yeah. And all of a sudden, there'd be the jumping when the screen came on and then he slow down, and oh, you're the youngest player, you miss a turn or something utterly minuscule like that. But he made it so intense.
And typically the VCR board games were objectively quite bad. But that almost
the acting
worked.
Was terrible.
It almost
Everything
worked
was
in their
terrible.
favor, right?
Yeah, because it was cheesy fun. That's half the love of horror is the cheesy aspect of it. There's always dark horror and extreme gore. Sometimes there's some fun cheesiness, especially in the 80s. God, I'm an old person. But because the VCR board games would have been 90s, I think, or early 90s. But no, they were cheesy acting, cheesy makeup, and everything. But there was a amount of fun to it, and you were able to get that jump scare aspect, which for a board game, like you said. Not that easy. Yeah. And as well, that does actually rely still on video as well, too, which sets it apart from a lot of... It's not a video game. Although it's a video game. But there's a visual aspect to it, which can create that sort of, like you said, even something like a jump scare type of thing to it. Yeah. And it's weird that I really like those, but I didn't like the
even though the acting was cheesy, I just thought the voice acting in the early Resident Evil games was just bad. So I think that's a huge difference. That's why I liked one, but wasn't crazy about the other. But Arkham Horror is another game where you have a limited, like there's constantly things building on the table, which makes it so that you have a limited amount of time. You're constantly having to play whack-a-mole, put out different fires. So that builds up sort of like anxiety within you. It's like, I have to get this done, I have to get this done. And the VCR ones have an actual clock to them. But at the same time, I've never been scared by a board game. And I think there's
intention.
Exactly. It'd be very difficult. There's been things where, like, even the This War of Mine board game, based on the video game. Not a horror game, but there are certain aspects of it, certain descriptions of events that happen to it, which are horrifying in that sense, because it's the horrors of war and different things. So not classically a horror game, but I had more of an emotional reaction to that game than I have to other games which are actually considered horror games. And I just think it's very difficult. But weirdly enough, Stephen King novels can freak me out sometimes. Yeah. He's like or other authors who are great with that genre. That's the one that I think of, because I think it's actually the only author that I've read true horror with. So it can be done in print form, but yet I haven't been able to find an actual tabletop. If you guys know specifically of a tabletop game where you feel if we were to sit down and play, we would actually legitimately start to get creeped out, and not Ouija board, because one, if I ever brought a Ouija board in my house, my wife would leave me. That would just be the end of that immediately. So nothing like that, but an actual board game. If you guys have a suggestion as to a board game that would work, that would sort of cross the line, that would give me the same sort of scary feeling like it did in really intense games, video games and stuff like that, let us know. But otherwise,
no Ouija board.
No Ouija board.
No matter how much they commercialize them, because there is a Stranger Things edition of a Ouija board. So remember,
really?
Oh yeah, remember when she has the lights and she's communicating with her son?
Yeah.
There's a Ouija board that looks like that with the string lights and everything. So
see, here's the thing. I don't care. Like 100%. I feel bad because I'm not trying to alienate anyone out there, or you as well too, if that's the case. And certainly because my wife does believe in stuff like this.
Yeah.
I don't believe in this stuff, so I don't consider it a game. It's just whatever. It's just meant to play on people's minds, sort of thing like that. But there are a whole bunch of people out there who do, and that's fine. I'm not knocking you. Again, my wife is one of them. So I'm not saying that, but I find it strange that it's like they would market a Ouija board in that way.
This is getting a little off topic, but I find it weird that they market it at all. If you believe in the Ouija board and what it's supposed to represent, it is literally your communication with the other side. In essence, it is proof that there's life after death, and there's a freaking Stranger Things version of it. You can get a hat with the Ouija board. You can get bat towels. Did you read my little blurb at the beginning of my book?
No.
I went in this spiel about, it's like, Ouija board was invented or started here and then, went here, and then like now you can buy them on like bat towels and stuff. Because like, again, I found that a weird juxtaposition where it's like, this is supposed to be, if you believe in it, proof of the afterlife, and yet here it is being marketed to every cheesy little aspect, like with t-shirts and everything. It's like, you're kind of, it's mystical, and yet let's just sell it any way we can. It was one of those things where it's like, and in some ways, again, if you believe in it, that almost implies, which I love in horror is, you're disrespecting power. You're not giving it its due. So it's like, I like that aspect where, you're not giving it what it's due, and you could be, bringing on some bad forces on yourself, which is why I do not have a Ouija board, never will.
But again, not to stay off topic, but
it's a board game.
It does make sense though to me, actually, now that I think about it, because what you said, we're supposed to be contacting the other side. Well, I mean, technically in the Stranger Things, the other side is the upside down, right? So you're contacting.
No,
maybe that's where the spirits. Maybe we're not contacting spirits if we use the Ouija board. Maybe we're contacting the upside down, which is all fictional, but still
a link. I'll give you that, but it's also a TV show. Quick side story here. So I believe with the Ouija board, someone's supposed to kind of guide, so everyone has fun with it. We went to a seance at St. Boniface Museum once, and where there's table tipping. Yeah, I don't know if you know what table tipping is.
No, I have no idea what that is.
So it's like you kind of hold a table, and then the spirit's supposed to guide and pick the table up.
So it's bullshit. That's what it is. Sorry.
Yeah, but essentially someone is like lifting the table, but you're also supposed to be holding it. And it was, we were there, and sometimes nothing happens. The spirits aren't there, but the table is going all over the bloody room, and like, so it was neat. It was should have been a little bit creepy, but you always hear about when people are in the presence of ghosts, there's that creepy feeling or the shiver runs down their spine. Yeah. My back was sore because I'm bending over to hold the table. That's the feeling I got. And I'm like, this is kind of neat. I'm sure this should be freaking me out, but really my back is kind of sore because I'm having to bend over. That's the feeling I'm getting. I'm not getting a creepy vibe. I don't feel this. I've felt creepy vibes. I've felt, I don't want to go into this place, this house or whatever kind of thing. I've felt that once or twice in my life. Didn't feel it at all during the table tipping thing. But it reminds me of the Ouija board because I think it's the same
I've never
aspect.
heard of that before in my life. So
YouTube it. You'll find probably hundreds of examples of
now that I think of it, maybe I would have seen an example of it at some point, but I never knew. I just immediately thought of cow tipping, which is probably something completely different. So
maybe I'm getting the name of it wrong. I think it's called table tipping.
Oh, it was cow tipping, wasn't it?
No. Oh man, we were drunk.
Out of curiosity, and this is one thing because I immediately thought of a couple examples when we were talking before, where we're playing a game and we threw the controller, right? Because we got freaked out. Have you ever been truly scared by a game that was in no way within considered the horror genre?
It kind of cuts the line, but believe it or not, Halo.
Really?
So there's it's an infamous level in Halo, the Halo 1, and they've kind of hinted to it in other ones too, called the Library. And it's when Halo kind of just dips into the cosmic horror body modification thing, because there's little things called the Flood, and they kill you but raise you as like space zombies kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually the main bad guy the main bad species in the first 3 Halo movies. But you get this one point where spoilers, you go to this facility and you keep thinking it's a weapon you're going to find to help fight the other alien races trying to kill humans. And what you actually find is that this weapon is actually this parasite that basically turns people into space zombies. But the other alien race thought it was this holy thing, so they went there to release this thing, not realizing it's this parasite thing.
Oh, okay.
So you're in this level called the Library, and you just get hit by wave after wave after wave. It's like a grind level, but it's so intense because they keep coming, and then little pod things will latch on a dead body and raise it up, and then they're coming at you, and they're 10 times harder to kill than the regular ones, and you're blowing everything away. You keep picking up guns like every other first-person shooter, blowing stuff away. You have not limited, but basically unlimited ammo kind of thing. But because of the way they keep coming at you with them, there is that degree of tension, and because they can actually kind of raise dead bodies-ish, there's that feeling of like you're never done kind of thing. Yeah. So it's not meant obviously to be the horror genre video game. It's first person shooter combat. Evolved is the name of the bloody game.
It sounds similar. Like I know there's certain similar things in like Mass Effect with the husks.
Yeah.
And then with Half-Life, for example, because the husks were very creepy looking. And even though it's a completely different type of monster, but Gears of War had that sort of like non-stop, sometimes like waves and waves of things. Yeah, I can see that being like very anxiety driven when it comes to, having to, and like when is it going to end?
Yeah. But and then it had that space zombie-ish thing going there. So
yeah. I can think of 2 instances where I literally threw my controller when I was freaked out, and they're very different examples. So, there at the beginning of the video, there was a list of different games that may be spoiled. So, if at this point, if you're still listening, there's definitely still spoilers ahead, because this is going to be one of them, and I feel bad because Batman Arkham City. When you encounter Man-Bat for the first time. So in that game, you're swinging, you're using your bat launcher, whatever the heck the grappling hook sort of thing, and you're like, and you go up to, it pulls you up to like building ledges and you pull yourself up. Yeah. Happens you do it 1,000,000 times in the game. And then at a certain point in the game, they decide we're going to introduce Man-Bat to you. And what happens is you launch, you pull yourself up, and just like every other time, you start to grab yourself up around the ledge of this building, and Man-Bat's face is right there screaming at you. And I threw my controller because that was not what I was expecting. There's some creepy things in that game, but that was one of the few times where I was like, jump scare? I thought that was great. I thought that was amazing.
Because again, you're not expecting it at all in that game.
Yeah. No. I actually have technically, who makes that? Warner Brothers or whoever makes the game? I can't remember.
It's a Canadian studio,
isn't it?
Rocksteady
or something like that. You guys owe me a controller because it actually broke the bumper on my one controller. So just so you know, I can send you my address if you want. Just contact me in the comment section, and I'll gladly accept it. But that freaked me. That scared me. That gave me a legitimate scare.
Those games, again, not horror ones, but Batman's always kind of in the dark.
Yeah.
Those ones we mentioned earlier about using like audio tapes and audio logs, those did a great job. The whole series, actually, of one, especially the ones with Killer Croc and everything.
Yeah.
When you're discovering his audio log, like some of those are kind of creepy.
Just food to me. And once I get a taste, I want the rest of the meal. You know what I mean.
Yeah, some of them are, they're pretty disturbing as to, and even like the corruption of Harley Quinn by the Joker for those audio logs. Now the other game, and this is going to make me sound like a colossal coward, but I was a child. I was a little wee child at the time. And Legend of Zelda 2, the side-scroller one. Okay? The side-scroller. It's okay. And we're talking old school Nintendo graphics as well, too.
Yeah.
There were these little tiny slimes that you would basically just jump and you would land on it because you could do this move where you held your sword down. You jumped up and boom, bop, like you bop their head sort of thing. Much like Mario would do with every...
But with the sword.
Yeah. Well, you're playing, and then at one point, you're introduced to this new creature, which is just one of those things, 10 times larger, but it falls down from the sky, from out of nowhere. Just randomly and hit. And the first time I encountered that, actually, I'll be honest with you, a couple of times when I encountered that in the game, I freaked out because I was so startled. You're expecting things to come from the side, and then all of a sudden this giant thing comes from the top, and I, again, threw my Nintendo controller.
It was on a controller cord, so it couldn't
have so it couldn't have gone far. And it didn't break.
Yeah. Xbox.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that freaked me. That was like 2 times that I can think of in games that weren't meant to be scary that absolutely scared the bejesus out of me. And again, like the Batman one was out of nowhere, but the Legend of Zelda one makes me sound like a complete and total coward.
Another spoiler one, for the very last Arkham Knight.
Okay.
This is a big spoiler, so literally plug your ears. So the Joker, I can't remember the exact plot points. The Joker is still alive, kind of in Batman's head.
Yeah.
So you're going through like the vent or whatever to break in somewhere, and you turn the corner, and Joker's like right there because he's not there, he's dead, but he's in Batman's head. And that happened a couple times where it's like all of a sudden, bam, there he is, and a weird jump scare, which makes sense given how they played that story out, but wasn't expecting it,
Yeah. No, that's a legitimate. Well, not quite. I mean, it's technically a jump scare, but at the same time, it was just that. Yeah, that game, man. All the Arkham games are great. I thought, even the ones that some people weren't crazy about. What was the one that people
the prequel?
The
third one.
Yeah,
I didn't. So everyone was complaining.
That one I really enjoyed as well too. I've enjoyed all of them thoroughly. So
the way they nailed the Joker's obsession with Batman and that, like the romanticism to me, is like wow.
And the voice acting was amazing. Resident Evil. Early Resident Evil. Now the voice acting in Resident Evil is phenomenal, absolutely incredible. One of the other genre of games actually that can fit within horror that we haven't discussed, because we talked about video games, we talked about tabletop games, but ARGs, so alternate reality games, which typically take place over different types of social media. YouTube is big for them as well too, but people have been doing it that you can do it through Twitter, or you can do it in a combination of things. Twitter, TikTok, even Facebook, which I hate, but whatever. That's another podcast for another day. But a lot of the times you'll see it on YouTube, and it's people who have created these sort of realities where it's an alternate sort of reality to it. And a lot of the time, as a commenter, you can sort of have some sort of impact on it, where you can leave comments, you can ask questions. Sometimes there's puzzles to figure out. True ARGs, in my mind, have some sort of puzzles where the audience needs to figure certain things out in order to progress. Now, there have been cases where certain mainstream things have created ARGs to promote games or what have you. But a lot of them are done by independent creators, and a lot of them are absolutely wonderful.
You've mentioned them once before when we were having a wing night or something like that, but
I absolutely loved it because a lot of the times there's sort of like almost a suspension of disbelief, so you're almost like really sort of investing yourself in it as well too. They sometimes they're trying to being passed off as real, which is there's a fine line between an ARG and someone just lying. Like, you know what I mean? But I think ARGs, you sort of lose something if you oh, this isn't real, this is fake, sort of thing like that. But if you sort of like allow yourself to become part of it, they can be absolutely wonderful. And I think there's going to be a lot more of them. There's a ton of them now. Unfortunately, a lot of the times they won't catch on right away because there's a certain viral aspect to them, and it's almost like required to happen naturally with them. So I honestly do think that there's untapped potential when it comes to, and one of the problems is that because ARGs are sort of like indie, a lot of times they're sort of like indie projects. People get really sort of weirded out if they're ever even somewhat trying to commercialize the ARG. There's like this feeling of purity. Now, I've been a full-time freelance artist for over a decade now. And you have to allow the artist to somehow monetize what they're creating. If artists never cared about, earning a living, there would be no art really for the most part. Like we need, in order to create, more art, we need to pay bills and so on and so forth. I mean, there are a lot of artists who work other jobs, and that's great. I've done that many, many times. But this idea that you can't create something like an ARG and then figure out a not necessarily like, predatory way of sort of generating revenue from it.
Good word choice. But
the idea that you can't try to generate any revenue whatsoever. Like, I would be fine if an ARG I thought was really interesting, and if they were like, Patreon, if they have a Patreon page or something like that. But immediately people like seem to shut that thing down when it comes to, you don't really care about but sometimes in order to produce more of something, you need to start generating revenue. And if someone's getting hundreds of thousands of views on something, like, you do generate some revenue from YouTube, but a lot of the time the topics that they cover in ARGs are going to have their videos demonetized. Like, if they're trying to tell a story which is trying to somewhat present itself as real, and it's about a murderer or some sort of other, scary thing, that's not necessarily considered ad friendly. So I personally like, and I know I'll probably be in the minority of this, of ARG lovers out there, I would really love it if I can see more ARGs done in a way where I can, somehow contribute to the creator. Like, make it like an actual game aspect to it. So that, like, if they want to create like puzzles sort of thing, like there are different games you can get where every month you get sent like a box, and it's basically you're solving a murder or something like that. You pay them, they send you the stuff, and then you sort of solve some sort of crime or some sort of like thing. I would be perfectly fine if more ARGs were able to incorporate something like that, because it would allow the creator to generate some revenue. It would allow me to have a more hands-on experience directly with the ARG. Yeah. And I think it's a win-win situation both ways. But again, I realize when it comes to certain things, especially when it comes to like, any sort of artistic thing, some people have some very, stuck in their ways views when it comes to certain things like that. But I would really love to see more of that, because I think that, more than even video games, definitely more than tabletop games, I think that has the best potential of being a true horror game genre. Something that you can actually feel like, that you're the same sort of feelings that you get from a really great horror movie. So that's just, I know you're not really into them at all.
Well, I've never really had a chance to experience them. So if you're putting any links down there, I'll make sure when I watch this.
There will be different examples shown. I'll mention like a few of them, sort of thing. But some of the ones that I've really enjoyed are some of the ones that have been highly recommended that I haven't had a chance, but I've heard amazing things of. And definitely check them out, because again, these are independent creators who are usually creating this. They don't have studios. Sometimes they do, very, very rarely. But a lot of times it's just like sort of like indie creators who are doing this, sometimes 2-person operations. And it's difficult because they I'm sure most of them would love to keep doing it forever, but life gets in the way. So before we move on to some of the suggestions from the comments, we talked a bit about them before, a couple of them, but get into more specifics.
Were there any suggestions about video games or just about board games?
There was both, actually. There's suggestions for board games and for some video games. Do you have a suggestion for a video game?
I do have a suggestion for a video game. It might be in the suggestions. Alan Wake.
Well, then leave it in the comments section. No, go ahead.
I don't know. We haven't talked about Alan Wake yet.
Oh, yeah. There's a remake of it or something, isn't
Apparently,
there?
yeah. That's unique timing because I just finished playing again this summer because at the time I believe it was on that Xbox Game Pass thing. So you never played it though?
I've heard great things about it, but I've never played it.
It was just a game that blew me away. Like it was almost like if Stephen King was in a game because it's about a writer goes to some small town to kind of get away and then horror stuff happens there. But they really did an amazing job of getting a little trippy. Not like it's not like a big acid trip game, but a couple of weird things happening. But one of the neatest things was in order to defeat an enemy, because there's a strong action component to it, you had to expose the enemy to light. So you had to like hit them with a flashlight until like they became weak from the light, and then you could attack them. So it had that limited resources kind of thing, like there are batteries and everything and light sources, but you couldn't just halo it and go in there and blow everything up. And some of the ways that it would make the trees move, so you'd be walking through forest at night, and all of a sudden the wind would come along, and you'd know that meant that a wave of enemies was kind of coming because of the supernatural kind of wind would go through it, and like the tree physics and the lighting for the time. I'm curious to see the remakes, but at the time they nailed it for that creepy like atmosphere. But beyond all that, they did one neat thing for a game that was relatively low in action. There was limited action, limited resources. They almost gave you like a freebie kind of scene where it's like you had unlimited resources for a short period of time and like wave after wave of enemy. And it was plot specific. And it went along with a song. Awesome song. I sent you this song years ago.
I probably don't remember.
No, it was like an 80s metal song because he's like at the stage. And again, I was saying light. Might be spoiling stuff here, sorry, but there's like you have to use light to defeat the enemy. So he's using like firework displays from this like stage set to light the enemies up so he can shoot them all. But it's like this awesome song is playing. It's like this 80s hair metal song, and it just fit in so perfectly. This like short little sequence of pure action.
I'll have to look that up because I've never heard about that scene at all, and I've heard a lot about Alan Wake, but I never.
Well, it was a short scene. It was like out of nowhere. I'm like, and I had forgotten until I played it again. I'm like, I love this song. It was like Children of the Elder God, I think it's called. Was the name of the song. Yeah, like
oh man,
pure 80s metal. Like
now I think I do remember you emailing me something about that.
Because like, why is he emailing this? Like, because I think you, Brittany, and Jared, and maybe one of those people who might appreciate a good 80s hair metal song. Like, it's from a video game. It's from an awesome scene in a video game. Some of you may never play, but the song's still really cool. Like, and I think that band actually has done some other stuff too. But I think the band was actually just created for the game.
You see, the thing is, I was never gonna like. It's one of those games where you hear about a lot of games,
yeah,
and then it's like you only have so much time, right? But now, then talking about it, I'm actually maybe I'll try it, because especially now because they have done that sort of revamped version of it.
For a while there, again, the old one was on Game Pass. I'm not sure I don't think it would still be if they did a remake. That seems like a bad marketing thing.
The Game Pass, like, not that we're not sponsored by anyone, but we're open to it. But yeah, Xbox Game Pass, it's good value for the money, because a lot of games now are same day. They're being released. Back for Blood, which is a game that I was hoping we get a chance to play. Actually, I was hoping we get a chance to play it for the month of October, but that's not going to happen. Which is I think it's like a first-person shooter version of Left 4 Dead, which is another great horror game.
Was it first-person shooter?
No, that was it. But wasn't that third-person shooter? I thought it was like, I can't remember. Oh, am I remembering wrong? I think because Back 4 Blood is definitely first-person, but I thought Left 4 Dead was third-person or whatever it is when you can actually see your person in front of you. Whatever, that's third-person, right?
That's third-person.
Yeah, like
Gears of War,
Dead by Dawn, or Dead by Dawn, which is a great game. And speaking of another horror game, Dead by Dawn. Dead. I played it on the channel. Dead by Dawn, right? I'm 100% sure it's DVD. Dead by Dawn.
DVD. Where
you have to go around, you fix generators. I'm sure it's Dead by Dawn, but you know whenever you ever say something and it sounds wrong in your head, even though you're probably right. But Dead by Dawn. Give me a second. I'm sure it's
real professional now.
Game.
Just whipping out the phone.
Dead.
You can look at your own YouTube channel.
Okay. Dead by Daylight. Dead by Daylight, which is basically the same thing. DVD, yeah.
Right?
So, yeah, that game is a lot of fun. That would definitely be in the horror genre as well, too. I don't remember why I started talking about this.
You were talking about Game Pass.
Yes, Game Pass. I don't know why I talked about this, because I think it's part of Game Pass, but I'm not sure. Oh, yeah, because we're talking about Back 4 Blood, Left 4 Dead, and then Dead by Daylight, which has a character from Left
4 Dead.
Left 4 Dead in it. Also, now that I'm spouting out different horror games, Friday the 13th had a very interesting game. There was the old Nintendo game, which I actually played, which was whatever.
Angry video game nerd, man.
Yeah.
Have you seen that video?
Purple Jason. Great. Yeah. Which they actually used as a skin in the Friday the 13th game. You can actually get Purple Jason from that. That was, I mean, it's a horror game, but at the same time, it's not really, I don't really consider it. It can be somewhat scary, but it's not, super scary. It's more just a fun, goofy game to play with a group of people.
Yeah.
And they're coming out with an Evil Dead game, which is very, very similar, as far as I can tell, to the Friday the 13th game, which isn't a bad thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's actually, in my mind, that's a very, very good thing. So that's another horror game. Honestly, I'll be honest with you guys. In editing, I'll be able to tell if there was any sort of like reasonable thread from that line of thought, but I got so sidetracked for not being able to remember Dead by Daylight that I have no idea why we're just spouting out games now.
Alan Wake was
Pac-Man! Sorry.
Alan Wake was on Game Pass, and then we got into Game Pass, and then all the games are on Game Pass, which you had mentioned earlier, Game Pass might be a subject, or services like that, subject for a future podcast.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said about that.
So do you have any other games to suggest?
No, that was pretty much one. I want to make sure to brought up Alan Wake because, again, it's like if Stephen King was in a horror video game.
Oh no! I mean, you made me want to play it now, which is annoying because I only have so much time to play different games.
And you got like a backlog, probably like 10 games.
I'm still really enjoying State of Decay 2. Yeah. And that's the thing, and that's taking any sort of free time I do have. I end up sort of putting into State of Decay 2 right now, and it's like. But now, whatever. Maybe one day. Now, if you guys had any suggestions as to games we should be playing or that would fit into this particular genre, let us know in the comments section. Now, some of you, I had actually left a post in the community section. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the channel, I try to post things in the community section in order to get feedback from anyone, not necessarily subscribers, but anyone. It's easier to sort of like to notice them because you get alerted to them if you're a subscriber and you have it set up for alerts. But even if you're not a subscriber, just let me know in the comments section. But in the community section, I've asked previously to us recording this podcast if anyone had any suggestions as to games, tabletop, computer games, whatever sort of thing that would fit into this genre. And a lot of you stepped up and told us some interesting games. Some we mentioned before. Some I've heard of and some I've never heard of before as well too. So some of the comments, for example,
Keyplants taps into the trend of certain games coming out with zombie-based DLC by saying, not a complete horror game, but how about Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare Expansion? Man, oh man. Kazi Shawnee suggests a different video game. I'm not sure if Phantasmophobia counts as a horror game. It definitely is suspenseful for me. Gorth, on the other hand, believes the greatest horror he's ever played is Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. It's not scary type of horror, it's action RPG about vampires, their society, and the rest of the undead. Can't recommend it enough. James Tension covers both bases of video games and tabletop games by saying Curse of Strahd and Van Ryck's Guide to Ravenloft are the first things that come to mind. The other thing that sprang to mind was Vampire on PS4. Such a great gem of a game that is seriously slept on. DJ Clark gives a good example of how you can possibly tweak an existing game to make your own fun. He said, last Halloween, my son and I ran our weekly game night playing a modern zombie apocalypse using the D20 modern rules. To get miniatures, we used the zombies and character models from our collection of Zombicide games. My friend and I made some terrain for the game at the beginning of the month, and I painted a couple of terrain pieces a week, so everything was ready by game night. That campaign ran for 2 months. And finally, Taboo X has a slightly different interpretation of what scary gaming can be. The price of a pack of Pokemon cards is pretty darn scary. $6 US at my local gaming store. Zoinks.
So thank you to all of the brainiacs out there who left comments and did suggestions of games. Some of them some of them I've heard of, some of them I've played, some of them I haven't tried before, but now I can't buy any more board games, but I'm probably going to buy at least one or two of these ones that you guys suggested. So yeah, that's pretty much it as far as I can think of for any sort of topics that we may want to discuss when it comes to horror games. Can you think of anything else that we're any sort of batting cleanup that we can do here that
I covered Resident Evil. I covered Alan Wake. We covered VCR board games. That's so you can't just go and really buy a VCR board game. You probably shouldn't, because maybe I'm just fond of them because of I like them. I don't know what else to say other than I like them. We can watch the videos of the games on YouTube.
Check out like eBay and places like that, or Kijiji or wherever that you buy things secondhand, because if you can find the board game part of it.
Yeah. The
videos are on YouTube. There's also some of them that came out later on, so there'll be DVDs, which are also obsolete at this point.
Yeah.
But you can, usually you can find the videos on YouTube. I know Loading Ready Run has played a few of them, so they're a small channel. You may not have heard of them, but yeah, you should check out, because they've done some gameplay stuff with those, and it did a good example of showing the campiness.
Yeah, it's good cheesy fun.
And that's the thing. It's fun. Even though it is within a genre which you wouldn't necessarily consider. That's why I like the Friday the 13th game, because it's so heavily entrenched within a franchise of horror, but it was just a fun game that you go and,
teenagers.
Yeah. Or you could try to kill Jason, if you're the teenagers. It's the teenagers versus Jason sort of thing. So he's really outnumbered. So really he's the underdog in that, right? So.
Sure.
Yeah.
One other little tip. Here's a tip from Travis.
Wait a second. Travis tips.
We use your, aren't you?
There we go.
You know what? If you want to do like a really good board game night and keep it creepy, you can go to a dollar store probably and buy little LED flickering candles, and you set them around almost any board game. Dim the lights as long as you can still read your cards and everything, and it helps set the mood. It's little touches.
Nice.
And you can again go once again to YouTube and find ambient music there. It's those little things that actually can really help make a game night, other than just all the lights on, throw the board down, let's play.
Yeah.
Dim the lights. Put some, don't use real candles, because you're going to get wax on your cool cards and stuff.
On your Ouija board.
Yeah, exactly.
On your Ouija board.
Use LED candles. Get some ambient music. You can literally just search scary ambient music, which is always good for gaming in general, and put that in the background and set the mood. That's a Travis tip. I like doing that.
Travis tips. Excellent. That's going to have to be an ongoing series, I think, in these podcasts, if we keep doing it. Who knows? I don't know how this is going to... I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the show, but now that we're wrapping things up, I do want to mention, very first time we've tried something like this. I have some notes in front of me. We tried to keep it as concise as possible, stick to topics. But this is also a wide topic to cover.
Yeah.
There are so many games which I know we've forgotten. And again, if there's any important ones or ones that you personally like, even if it's like an obscure one that you just think is like, people are not aware of sort of thing, let us know. Definitely let us know. If you like the video, please consider liking the video, because that goes hand in hand. And if you really liked it, then you can always subscribe, and that way you'll know when we have more pearls of wisdom like we've presented you with in a lovely necklace today out in the future. So there you go. Right? Yeah. That was awful, but whatever. I'm gonna stand by it. I'm not gonna edit it out. I won't. I refuse to edit it out because it was too good. It was far too good. As well, too, Travis and I, prior to recording this, we recorded a game of zombies.
Classic.
So that video, I believe, will be up either the Saturday before Halloween or the Friday before Halloween. I'm not entirely sure which. This one, I'm not sure when the podcast is up, but the podcast will be up before that video. But definitely keep an eye out for that, because that was a fun bit of gameplay in a
busy week ahead of you.
Yeah. It's going to be immediately after I'm done here. Go to the computer, start editing this. So for those of you who are interested in watching us talk like this again, the next episode we are going to tackle are going to be games that you can play with large groups of people. Tabletop games, party games, if you will, but not necessarily party games, because American Thanksgiving, I know, is coming up. Christmas is sadly, still a ways away, but it's not that far away. More and more people are getting together now that some restrictions in different places are loosening. I think that a good party game can really bring a family together and make them want to kill each other. So, and this will not be, we won't be, again, I'm not ragging on Monopoly. We won't be talking about games like Monopoly, but there are going to be certain games that I really enjoy. I know you've played some party games as well too. So with that in mind, if you guys have any suggestions as to what type of party games that maybe we could talk about, let us know in the comment section below. I will be mentioning this as well too in the community section of the channel, so you can also let me know there if there's any type of games that you want. But that will be the next one that we're going to tackle, because I already have a few interesting games that I've played around with that I would really like to sort of run by you and you guys as well too.
Cool.
Travis,
Yo.
anything else you'd like to say? Or
I talked Alan on Wake Up Enough, I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Those are the big ones. And
Close to my heart.
thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you all again in the next video.